I have recently been called a science denier. Ooh. Wow, never in all of my life would I figure that a person like myself who loves scientific investigation and facts and intrigue and actually do some of this with my free time because it's fun, never thought I'd be accused of being a science denier. But anytime you believe in God, if you believe and trust in the Lord Jesus Christ and the Bible, and that is where your faith is, you're eventually going to get into a debate with evolutionists or atheists, and they're going to flat out have to leverage some kind of false claim against you, such as, oh, you're a science denier. Now, let me clarify. I am a certain scientist interpretation denier. I don't stand against all scientists, and I don't stand against scientific information, but I do stand against faulty scientific information, or especially faulty scientific interpretation. So anyhow, as I was in this recent debate, one of the things that came up with, you're a science denier, is the concept of dendrochronology. And being that I like this kind of stuff, I'm like, well, what is dendrochronology? And I'll tell you here in the next couple of days, hopefully not longer than that, that I will produce another video that is much longer in its scope, but I'm not ready to put that forward yet because I want to do a really thorough job of getting into the details on that. But there is hocus pocus and rigmarole and magic going on in the scientific community that they don't want you to know about. In fact, the more I investigate these things, the more like magicians these guys seem. And it's not that they can't do great scientific analysis, but with the interpretation and the application of the tools and the facts and the figures they have, they continually misappropriate it when it comes to the field of evolution. So when it comes to something like radiocarbon dating or carbon-14 dating systems, the scientists want to paint a picture for the community that you basically take an object and you test the object. And what you're doing is you're testing for C14 in the object. You get that result. You take that result, you measure it against a chart, and the chart will tell you the age of that object. And it's just that simple. Objects, test, results, age. They want to make it that simple, and they want it to seem that simple for the rest of the world as the world views on. Now, when you start digging into this, you start asking some questions that are pertinent, such as, where did that chart come from? Where did this chart that gives us the carbon-14 analysis, where does it come from? And then things start getting very, very interesting. And it's not as straightforward as you could imagine. Or if you've done any kind of creative creation science research or any kind of investigative research into the world of evolution, you're going to find a very common theme. And it's basically like circular reasoning or circular approval. I approve that field approves me, and it's very constant. So the concept and the consistency and the chart understanding that they give their ages from, well, it comes from dendrochronology or tree ring counting. So if you count the rings on the trees and then you take that timeline and measure it with some C14, then you should get some very good results. Now, I think it makes a lot of sense that we could chop down a tree and count the rings and know the age of that tree. That seems very straightforward. But as you dig into it more and more, it's a little more complicated than that, because what do you do after you run out of tree rings to count? Then where do you start getting your information from? Now, they even know it's limited, but basically they take cuts from one tree and then compare it against dead cuts in another tree, or pieces of wood that have been found in structures around the world, or even pieces of ash that where a log has been turned into ash, and you can still count the tree rings in that. But when you begin to match up all of these tree rings, it doesn't quite fit the way you would expect. Now, for anybody that has put together a 1,000-piece puzzle, you can actually have puzzle pieces that begin to fit together that don't fit together. And you can tell that because the colors aren't quite right, but the colors look like they could possibly be right. The piece sure seems to fit, but the colors don't. And so you could basically run across 2 or 3 puzzle pieces that can fit in 2 or 3 positions that don't really go there, and that's just with a 1,000-piece puzzle set. Now, can you imagine core drilling thousands upon thousands of trees that have grown up in differing areas, even though they're close together? One tree could be getting more sunlight or more water or more oxygen because it's on the edge, or it has, some kind of advantage in the root system and the ground underneath it. And can you imagine taking core samples from thousands and thousands of trees and just trying to create a chronological timeline to base your aging methods upon? It gets a little problematic. Well, you need to understand that carbon-14 is based off of this chronological dating timeline that was created, and it's not so straightforward. In fact, it depends on if you're like in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere, or if you're taking marine readings, etc. And I found and I'm not obviously not a scientist, but I found out in just a little bit of research that I did, that if you are trying to date or calibrate certain things, that you're going to need certain calibration charts, and you might use the IntCal 98 or the IntCal 04 or the IntCal 13 or the IntCal 20 or the Marine 04 or the Marine 03 or the Marine 20 or the SHCal 04, 13, or 20. You could use the NH1, the NH2, the NH3, the SH1 and 2, the SH3, the NH1 monthly, the NH2 monthly, the NH3 monthly, the SH1, 2 monthly, or the Cure, Kevin Kroner, or the Santos if you're into post-bomb curves. And I don't even know what I'm talking about. And I know some of these are updated charts, but basically you have all of these statistical curves and mathematical variances because it's not so straightforward as they want you to imagine that it is. In fact, the post-bomb curve information, those calibrations and statistical curves that are given are for negative carbon-14 results. So basically, if you're testing something and it doesn't have any carbon at all, you might have to use this chart over here because you can't even test for what you're testing for. Now, what is very interesting is since dendrochronology isn't complete and it isn't perfect, and since it's got portions and gaps and jumps and starts, etc., they are supplementing a lot of this with, atmospheric readings or marine readings or mineral deposit readings. Basically, since the carbon-14 chart isn't complete in dendrochronology, they are going over into the caves and taking carbon readings there. And then they're going over here and getting soil samples. And I don't know exactly all the places, but they're patchworking together a carbon-14 chart. And they're saying, hey, we know what we're doing. Trust us. And it's very interesting in my mind's eye that the evolutionists always, with the end of their arguments, are like, trust us. We know what we're doing. Whereas the creationist argument is always like, why don't you trust your common sense on this? Let us present you with the problem and you see if what they're doing makes sense or not. One almost seems like an information keeper and one seems like an information sharer. Like one wants to hold power over you and the other one wants to free you. Well, along with this, as as one evolutionist was quickly, pointing out, I was like, even if you hang us on radiocarbon dating, we've got fission track dating and thermoluminescence dating and paleomagnetism dating or paleomagnetic dating. And he just starts rattling off these other dating methods as if none of those have problems within them of the same order and magnitude. So it is not that people like myself are actually science deniers. It's just that we actually have questions when it comes to this data that doesn't make sense to us. If you don't have complete timelines, then why are you creating timelines? And if you have a gap in this, why are you filling it in with something over here that has gaps all in it? Why is circular reasoning and circular approval okay in the realm of science if we're trying to be mathematically correct and accurate? A question that needs to be asked is everybody that could be good at science, did everybody that absolutely was wonderful and could be good at science, did they all go into the realm of science? Or did some of them do other things with their life? And as they are looking over into the realm of science and asking tough questions of scientists, why can't the scientists that are in those fields just say, hey, we don't have that all together. We don't really have the right for this. Why are we covering our tracks constantly? Why are we being dishonest about these things? So I'm not necessarily a science denier, but I'm definitely an interpretation of certain men in science, and I will deny their claims all day long.